We're almost ready. Perfect. All right. Let's see. So, with us today is Fran Hutchins, Director of Bracken Cave Preserve. Fran has been with Bat Conservation International for more than 15 years, directing educational bat flight programs and the restoration work on BCI's Bracken Cave Preserve. If you're not familiar with Bracken, it is home to the largest colony of bats in the world. And as director of the preserve, Fran is the definitive expert on everything Bracken. So after the presentation, Fran will have time to answer your questions. So be sure to type it in the Q&A box if you're on Zoom, or type in the comments if you're watching on another platform. So hello, Fran.
Hey, how's it going, Linda?
It's going. Tell us about the creepy crawlies.
Okay, everybody, thanks for spending your afternoon. It's early Halloween, but we're going to talk about some of the different critters and creepy crawlies that we have out here at Bracken Cave Preserve, and that also that we encounter from time to time with the different work that we do with caves and bats. So we'll get going here. I'm going to stop my video to save bandwidth, and so. Just click. We're going to start off with creepy crawlies. One of the critters we run into all the time are harvestmen or daddy longlegs. They love caves, especially around the entrances to caves. A lot of the nooks and crannies that we have. They're nice, cool, damp places for these little critters. And there are bazillions of them crawling around in the cave entrances. And they, when they get real excited, when we get near to them and they start bouncing and all that, um, they're an arachnid, and they just will crawl all over you and kind of give you the creeps. So if you're not into spiders, these guys will drive you crazy, crawling all over you. Another cave critter we run into all the time are our cave crickets. You can see there's a bunch of them. See all they got really long antennas. They're throughout the cave system, and the cave crickets are actually a good indicator of how healthy the cave ecosystem is. We can see all because they leave the cave at night to feed on plants and organic material outside the cave. And then when they come back in the early morning hours and they poop, the poop is food for some of the other invertebrates that live in the cave and frogs. Some of our snakes and some other critters will eat them as well. So they're a really important bug that lives in our caves, and they'll be hopping all over and crawling all over you when we're crawling through these caves. Another bug that we run into. This is the Texas red-eyed devil. These are a katydid. They're about 4 inches long. If you ever pick one up, make sure you have leather gloves on, because they will bite. If you Google a Texas red-eyed devil, usually the image that pops up is one of these guys eating a gecko. So they're pretty aggressive. Most people don't run into them too much. They're if you're out, you might even run into them in your neighborhood. If you're sitting in your neighborhood or out in the woods and you hear this lone sound that's really loud, that's the mating call for one of these Texas red-eyed devils, a very large katydid that we have on the preserve. So we get to run into them all over the place. Another couple different bugs that we run into. The one here on the left is a camel spider. We don't have those at Bracken, but we do run into them out in West Texas and parts of New Mexico, southern parts of the southwestern United States when we're out doing field work. Um, And these guys are really fast, scurry, got large mandibles. They're not venomous to us, but they are pretty creepy, especially at night when they're moving around. If you got a full moon and one of these guys crawls over the top of your tent, they're about 4 or 5 inches long, but they look like they're about a foot long when they get a little shadow on them. And then of course, a lot of people bump into cicadas. These guys, these big, they're loud. We hear them all throughout the preserve on the trees. Excuse me, making a lot of racket. But they're pretty creepy. They spend most of their time underground in their larval stage. But that's another one of our kind of our creepy crawlies that we have on the preserve. Excuse me. Now, these are our Texas giant walking sticks. From about mid-May through the end of June, these guys are crawling around all over. It's mating season, so they're all over the trees, all over the preserve. They see in Christy's hand there, that big green one, that's the female. She's about 11 inches long, and that the smaller one is the male, kind of brown and green. But they are all over the trees, and kids love them because they'll crawl all over you. They don't bite or anything out. Just kind of creepy. If you're not into things crawling all over you, these Texas giant walking sticks will give you the EBGBs, that's for sure. So if you have a chance to come out to the cave, you get to see these guys all over the trees around the preserve. And then our caves, we have domestic flesh-eating beetles, and they're housekeeping. They're really a necessary component of a healthy cave ecosystem that has a lot of bats. And the floor of the cave is covered with these domestic flesh-eating beetles, and literally you see how they're moving around. The ground is literally moving. The beetles are so thick. There's different stages. There are a couple different larval stages wiggling by there, but the beetles, like I said, they are just all over the cave floor. And part of that ecosystem in Bracken Cave is our guano is over 100 feet deep. It's been accumulating for thousands of years. So that's kind of creepy too, is we have that much bat guano that's been accumulating. We actually have 6 different species of domestic living in our cave, and they're between the surface, the larger one that you see here in the video clip, and you can hear them. They make a lot of noise. We're crawling when you have a microphone down near the cave floor when they're crawling around and eating stuff. So bats, it's not good for the bats to be down on the floor of the cave because the beetles will swarm all over, and then they'll pick a bat to the bone in just a couple hours. So, and we'll have them crawling all over us. And the bite, you can see some different size ones here in the video clip if you want to look that close. But so that's kind of a lot of some of the different insects that we have. Then one of the other things as part of our work is caves, and some people think caves are kind of creepy and scary. They're not like the movies. So there's no glowing mold or natural light. So when the lights go out, you can't see anything. So here's some of the crew were out doing some bat counts and surveys in the cave, and you can hear this particular cave has water in it, so you can hear us sloshing through the water in some point here and there as we go through the cave. We're looking for bats to count and identify the different species that we have and inventory and these caves that we have throughout Texas. But this is a really nice cave. As you can see, is a passage. All this passage was formed by water, flowing water over millions of years as the water flowed underground and carved out These eroded away. That's limestone that makes up most of the caves that we have here in Texas. But yeah, so this is kind of how it looks like if you're wandering through one of the caves with us. And as the crew moves through, you can see the different passage. I'm gonna we'll listen here for a few minutes. You can hear us walking through. It's nice and quiet, cool. The caves are relatively cool. It can be 68, 70 degrees during the summer months. But this is what it looks like wandering through a Texas cave. And then so some of the caves that we go into have a lot of water in them. So we're have to swim through the caves, and the bats are roosting up and above us there. And then here's another little clip of the crew. You can see some of the different pretty formations. But we'll go through. We'll collect swab samples and inventory the bats, the different species of bats throughout the cave as we move through the caves. So you can see Melissa and Sarah, Christina are part of our field crew here in Texas that are going through the caves. And then everybody loves snakes, usually. Snakes can be kind of creepy. We have a number of different species of caves, snakes on the preserve. One of the ones we have the most of that we see, and you'll get to see one of them when you come out to the preserve, and you got to look for snakes up in the trees just as much as you got to look for snakes down on the ground. This is a Western coach whip. These guys get about 6 foot long. Here's Christy with one of our Western coach whips. They're non-venomous, and we can have half a dozen of these guys down near the entrance of the cave in the evenings catching bats for dinner. But this is just one of the 3 biggest snakes that we have near the cave is our Texas rat snakes and our Western coach whips, which is one of the fastest snakes in North America. And then here's one of our Texas rat snakes. The one on the right here is actually hunkered down in a bag of feed, bird feed for one of our bird studies that we've got going on the preserve, and it's sitting in there waiting for a mouse to come by. Another one on the left, you can see where it's recently swallowed something. It's got that big bulge in him. But these are the 2 of the biggest snakes. The other biggest snake we have on the preserve are, of course, our Western diamondback rattlesnakes. We have them throughout the preserve. The one on the right is actually, if those of you that have been out to the preserve, we have a really nice porta-john. But every now and then the rattlesnakes will go up in the porta-john, and so we got to keep an eye out for them. But we run across them all the time in the caves, near the cave entrances. They like to eat mice, so that's what they're primarily there for, is eating the mice in the caves. And then some of the other reptiles and amphibians that we have on the preserve. The top left there is a Texas alligator lizard. These guys can be 12 to 16 inches long. The bottom left there is a coral snake. So it's one of the venomous snakes that we have on the preserve. We have a gray tree snake, not tree snake, tree frog, just sitting there on a little lit branch. Up in the top right is a toad, one of the toads that we have on the preserve. Bottom right is so that black looks almost like a piece of pipe is a indigo snake, and it's eating a 3 foot long Texas diamondback water snake, a non-venomous water snake that it's caught near the entrance to this man-made cave um, down near Georgetown in Texas. So we're ran across this guy. Took about an hour and a half for that indigo snake to swallow that 3 foot long rattlesnake. That indigo snake was about almost 7 foot long. So really long snake. And then look, we have our hognose snake. Got its all flared up and acting like that's a viper snake and everything, trying to be scary. So we have those on the preserve as well. They're always fun. The next step, this guy will just roll over and puke and act like he's play dead. But yeah, we have a number of these on the preserve. Now, a lot of people don't think of birds as being creepy, but some of our vultures that we have on the preserve sometimes can be creepy, um, especially when they're sitting around um, uh, feeding on a kill. So this is a whole bunch of black vultures. On the right-hand side, there's a couple turkey vultures mixed in there. And over on the right-hand, far right, you can actually see a caracara sitting there waiting its turn. But the one in the picture right up front on the left is a turkey vulture that's coming into one of our little ponds to get a drink of water and to get in a selfie there off the game camera. But we have these vultures that, on the preserve as well. And some of the animals that sometimes people might think are creepy. We have our feral hogs. Um, there's about 13 of them in this picture. They're down there at the entrance in the sinkhole of the cave in the evening, um, just eating on roots of plants and whatnot. And then on the right hand side, we have our one of our resident porcupines. Um, the This guy is just chilling out. They eat the bark off the trees and spend most of the time in trees or they're in burrows throughout the preserve. But we do have the porcupines. And on the left-hand side, that's a aoudad. These are an exotic species from parts of Africa, Pakistan, India. They're not native to Texas. So this one particular one, big male, has gotten loose off of one of the exotic game ranches and are now they're kind of a problem for competing against our white-tailed deer and for food sources and whatnot. And then we have a creepy cute baby not porcupine, baby armadillo there that was near the cave this past summer. There's actually 4 of these guys running around. So we have porcupines and armadillos and a lot of different animals on the preserve. And we can't be a bat organization without, we don't think bats are creepy, but some people do. There's a cluster of some Townsend's big-eared bats. You can see a close-up there on the right-hand side. So they can kind of be kind of creepy when they're flying around, you're close to them. But they're just a beautiful, beautiful animal, really important to us and to the environment and our ecosystem. And there's a couple other headshots. So on the left there, we've got a couple Mexican free-tail bats. And then on the right-hand side is a tricolor bat. There's a relatively small bat that hibernates in a lot of the caves, spends the roosts in trees and tree cavities, and then hibernates in caves and culverts in the area. And then we have wild turkey. So this is actually a turkey hen that is sitting there at the viewing area one summer, watching a bat flight. And then we've got different kinds of fungi. on mushrooms and whatnot on the preserve. One here on the left is our Texas star mushroom. So it's also been known as a hissing mushroom. As it opens up, it makes a hissing sound. So we have these when we get on a rainy times of the late winter, early spring. If we've gotten enough rain, these will pop up throughout the area. We've got some parts of the preserve. We have Spanish moss all over the trees. So that's pretty cool, especially early in the morning and in the evenings. You got all that moss hanging down, and it's kind of Halloweenish. Um, these are our jack-o'-lantern mushrooms. These guys are really cool. Besides being beautiful orange mushrooms, they bioluminesce. So at night you can see they glow as they're bioluminescing. So that's kind of weird when you're looking out into the trees and you see this light there off in the distance. So they're pretty cool. And then we have some other different mushrooms. The one there on the left is the devil's horn. It's kind of slimy and gooey, kind of stinks, but lots of different species of mushrooms on the preserve. And then some people think our work can be a little creepy. But we're crawling around in caves. These are kind of tight places. It's dark. This is Priscilla, one of our field staff, coming out from one of the cave spots. That cave bat work and caving is not for everybody. Here's another shot in one of our caves that we're working on. So we'll let you take a moment here and see what it's like to walk through a cave when it's not on TV. There's a little bit of ledge there, about a 30-foot drop. We actually call this passage in this particular cave slip and die. Sounds scary, but yeah, you probably wouldn't die, but you'll get bruised up pretty good. But gotta like tight places if you're gonna work with bats. But and this is another one of our caves where they're great to help protect the cave and keep people out. And some of the field staff hamming it up. But I want to thank everybody for your time, and I think we're going to take some time here and answer some questions.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Fran, for all of that. My skin is definitely crawling now. Um, so let's get some questions. So first off, we've got Julie and Terry Lou kind of asking some questions together. Do the bats eat the crickets inside the cave? Do the bats eat any of the insects that live inside the cave?
No, we haven't seen the bats eating the crickets and everything. Most of our species of bats that we have in the hill country eat flying bugs, so they and the crickets are crawling around on the ceiling and the floor, so they wait till they get outside to eat them. But between some of our like garter snakes and mice and some of our other bigger bugs in the cave, they'll eat the crickets.
Okay. And got a question from LinkedIn from Jean. Do the different species compete for space in the cave?
Somewhat. The different species of no, are we talking about bat species or bug species? And they kind of do a little bit. For example, with the bats, some of our different species of bats like different temperatures. So we can some of the caves we have 5 different species of bats in them. And for example, that picture of the Townsend's bigger bats that we were looking at earlier, they like to roost near the entrance of the cave. There's usually a lot of airflow. Um, so we'll find them near entrances or the first room. Tricolor bats, they tend to find little nooks and crannies. They're more solitary. You rarely see more than a couple roosting together at the same time. So yeah, so they're pretty solitary. Um, so you'll see different bats in different portions of the cave, mainly depending on the temperature.
Okay, cool. Um, Julie wants to know, what do walking sticks eat?
So the Texas giant walking sticks are vegetarian, so they eat the different plants. We find them mostly on our juniper, ash juniper, or hackberry trees. So they'll eat the leaves off of those.
Good to know. They certainly look big enough to like eat other animals, so it's good to know they're vegetarian.
They're vegetarian.
Yeah. So we got someone asking, Lori wants to know, can you talk a little about who gets to explore the cave and what they do there? Does the public ever go into the cave?
So for Bracken Cave, the environment, unlike most of the caves that we have throughout the country, these big backcount roost caves, the environment is pretty nasty and pretty hazardous for people. So if you can, like for example, in Bracken Cave, it's 104 degrees in there, where most caves are 68, 70 degrees. And that's because of the 100 feet of guano and the heat it generates as it decomposes, and the millions of bats and their body temperature and the heat that it generates. And of course, the ground is a great insulator. So the cave is very hot, it's very humid. And then you can imagine with all that guano and all the bats that are peeing and pooping, the ammonia levels are very high. Actually, they're so high that we have to wear special breathing gear in order to do our work in those caves. And in the particular rooms that the bats may be roosting in, we have to wear special breathing gear because of the hazardous air that's in there. So for Bracken, we don't have tours inside the cave. That and all the flesh-eating beetles that's in there, it's just pretty nasty environment. So the tours are outside, sitting up on the ledge of the sinkhole, watching the bats come out. But there are a lot of commercial caves in the Texas Hill Country. For example, Natural Bridge Caverns, which is right next door to us, that people can come and tour, and they're beautiful places.
Definitely. We've got a question from YouTube. The asker is Amaya, age 9. How do the snakes capture and eat the bats? Aren't the bats in the air and snakes on the ground?
Right. So when they're coming out, for example, at Bracken Cave, when they come out, the vortex or bat native that we call is swirling around there in the bottom of the sinkhole. And our Texas rat snakes, they will hang from the ceiling of the cave right near the entrance and grab the bats out of the air. The coach whip snakes, they're on the ground near the entrance of the cave, and down there the bats are within a few inches of the ground because there's so many bats. So they'll just rear up and grab them, or sometimes, because these bats only weigh about 15 grams, which is like 2/4, barely half an ounce. So they're not very heavy. So if we get any little gust of wind, sometimes the bats can get knocked down onto the ground. And so that's where the snakes will take advantage and shoot over and grab one off the ground. Some of our other caves, because of the formations in the ceiling of the cave, the snakes can crawl along those formations and catch bats off the ceiling as well.
Fascinating. Darlene would like to know, are dermestid beetles in the cave year round?
Yes. So for example, with Bracken Cave, they're there all year round. We now have an overwintering population of a few 100,000 bats. So there's food there all the time. But when the majority of bats leave, you'll see the population of the beetles decline. They are also eating. They're not just eating the bats; they're also eating the bat guano. So, and bat guano is kind of like small. It's like the size of a mouse turd. So, so the beetles are eating that as well. So we have, and so a lot of the guano is a mixture of beetle guano, which is like almost like talcum powder. It's very small on the floor of the cave. So the beetles are eating the whatever bats fall on the floor, and also the bat droppings as well.
Question from Facebook. Diana would like to know, with the beetles consuming bats so quickly and the guano being so deep, there must be a decent amount of bones. Is there some archaeological history in there too?
Yeah, there could be. We haven't, because of the environment inside the cave, and just we haven't been able to get a deep enough sampling of the guano, because it's very fine. So we haven't been able to get a deep enough sampling of the guano, or done like an archaeological dig in the guano, because we would have to get down near, down 20, 30, 40 feet to really start seeing something that hasn't been disturbed. Because for hundreds of years, the guano had been mined out of the cave. And so for fertilizer or for gunpowder production. So, probably the top 20 or 30 feet of guano had been removed. And the bats are replacing that every year, some of it every year in small quantities over time. But yeah, we just don't have the equipment or the tools to be able to get a deep enough sample of the guano to do that. But it would be a really cool project if we could figure it out.
Mm-hmm. Got some guano questions for you. So, Meryl first wants to know, can you walk on the 100 feet of guano? And then Christine wants to know, what's it smell like inside the cave?
So so it smells really bad. The and you don't have to go inside the cave to smell it. You can get near if you're near the entrance to the cave, you can smell it. It's I really don't know how to describe it, but it's a combination of lots of urine and the poop. It's pretty intense. Inside the cave, we're wearing special breathing gear, so we can't smell it, which is good. But yeah, it smells pretty bad. What was the other part of that question?
Can you walk on the 100 feet of guano, or I don't know, do you sink through?
Yeah, so when you're walking around, it's kind of like walking around a little bit like on powdered snow. You'll sink down a couple inches or so, 3 or 4 inches, when you're walking around, but it compacts on its own under its own weight over time.
Okay.
And I guess the only other thing is like, um, there are, because the cave is still active, and if it's raining on the surface, the rain water will drip down from the ceiling and drip down on the floor of the cave, and we'll get these wet spots. Now, so the best thing I can say is there's the pilot for Dirtiest Jobs was shot at Bracken over a decade ago.
Oh,
So if you
wow.
get a chance to catch that, you can see Mike Rowe when you step into a wet spot, you can sink down 4, 5, 6 feet into the guano. So that's really nasty.
Ew. I'll have to get out then.
That's gross.
Let's see here. Oh, quick question from Facebook from Toby. He missed it. Where exactly is Bracken Cave located?
So Bracken Cave, we're down here about 20 miles just outside of San Antonio, Texas, right here in the hill country. So if you're in San Antonio, we're just northeast of downtown San Antonio.
Yes. Jilly's got a question. You touched on some of the safety equipment that everyone who goes in wears. Is there anything that you hadn't mentioned, or is there anything specific you wear to protect against, some of the creepy crawlies in there, like the snakes and the beetles?
The most of the critters in if unless you're watching a movie or something, a sci-fi thing, most of the animals, they just want to get away from us. So if we come near them, they take off and run away. Um, we wear masks and whatnot to protect us from the dust and the guano that might get kicked up when we're walking around. But and the beetles, most caves don't have them in them, so that's not really a big problem. We'll wear a Tyvek suit and rubber boots and to try to keep the insects from biting us. But for the most part, the snakes and the porcupines and raccoons and all those other critters that we run into near the cave, and most of those are near the cave entrances. They tend to go run and hide when we come by.
Got it. Okay, we've got a question from a fan off X. How many species of bats live in these caves usually?
So in Texas, we have 32 different species of bats. There's probably seven of those species tend to roost in caves. Some of them will roost in caves and or tree cavities or rock ledges and nooks and crannies and rock crevices and stuff like that. But we've got seven different species of bats that'll call roosting caves, and a lot of them they use the caves for hibernaculums during the winter months to hibernate in.
Oh, okay. Um, Ellen's got a question. How old are the baby bats before they're left in the cave, or how does that work?
Yeah, so the pregnant females migrate to the Texas Hill Country in March. They start having their babies around June, and they have one baby bat each. A baby bat's called a pup, and within about 5 or 6 weeks, the babies start flying, and then by 8 weeks, they're weaned and on their own, and then they're like I said, they're teenagers at that point, but they're on their own.
Got it. Julie is asking, do any local animals prey on the rattlesnakes and the other snakes there?
Usually not. Our rattlesnakes and coach whips and rat snakes, um, they're 5, 6 foot long, so they're pretty good sized snakes. Now, the indigo snakes will eat other snakes. So that's one thing they're good for. And some of our king snakes will eat some of our smaller like garter snakes and green tree snakes and stuff. But as far as the bigger snakes, usually it's just the hawks will eat them every now and then. I've seen Cara catch a snake if it's out in the open. But for the most part, there's not too many things eating the snakes.
Top of the food chain, I guess. All right. We've got another question. How about other animals around the cave that may not be as creepy?
Right. Yeah. So at the preserve, we have 1,500-acre preserve right here in the hill country. We have white-tailed deer, red-tailed hawks. We have gray fox, coyote. We have a pack of coyotes, porcupines, raccoons, skunks. Different. Some of our ponds will have red-eared slider, turtles in them. So we have a little bit of everything that you would find typically in the Texas Hill Country, as far as the different animals. Whitefoot mouse, lots of different gopher rat, so lots of different small mammals, and the different reptiles. You saw most of those in the pictures. And then we've got 124 species of birds that called a preserve home. One of the cool ones is our endangered golden cheek warbler. It's an endangered migratory songbird that's here. Cardinals and summer tanagers and phoebes, lots of different wildlife that calls the preserve home.
Lori and Michael have some similar questions. How long does the Mexican free-tailed bat live for, and how long do they roost in the cave, and do they return to the cave their entire lives?
So the Mexican free-tailed bat lives about 12 years in the wild. They are migratory, so they spend the summer months in the Texas Hill Country. Actually, and they're spending the winter down in Mexico, where there's in thousands of smaller roosts, and they migrate up into the hill country. And actually, the Mexican free-tailed bat range is as north as, say, the Kansas, Nebraska, and East Coast to West Coast. And they come up through Texas as part of their migration. And they're here, and they evolved to migrate north and get roost in these large maternity colonies. So Bracken is a maternity roost for these bats. So you can think of the cave as like this giant incubator. Like I said, it's 104 degrees in there. So it's nice and warm for the baby bats. And there's so that's kind of their life cycle as they come up from Mexico up through the Texas and to East Coast to West Coast.
Okay. Toby had a question. Is Bracken a limestone cave?
Yes. Bracken's a limestone cave. It's 650 feet long, 124 feet wide at the floor, and 117 feet floor to ceiling. And then you got 100 feet of guano that's accumulated over thousands of years. It's two big, massive rooms that the bats are roosting in. And it's in the cave is actually in the Glen Rose limestone formation. And where we stand to watch the bat flight is actually the bottom of the Edwards limestone formation, so that we're in a transition zone between two limestone formations. And the preserve is all as part of the recharge zone for the Edwards aquifer. So that's where we get our drinking water from.
Okay. Robert would like to know if white nose syndrome has been recorded in Bracken Cave.
So the white nose syndrome, the disease, has not been in Bracken Cave, and that's mainly because the fungus PD affects our hibernating bats. And since the Bracken bats are migratory, they're not being impacted the same way our hibernating bats are. We do have the disease in Texas, but the Bracken Cave has the fungus PD that causes the disease.
Okay, got it. Julie's got a question. Has Bracken Cave and the area been experiencing drought? And if so, how does that affect the cave wildlife?
Yes, so it's the weather here in Texas. I mean, for example, today it's going to be almost 90 degrees, so we're still pretty warm even this time of year. But the hill country has been experiencing drought cycles especially over the last decade, 12 years. When we're in a severe drought, it does affect the behavior of our free-tailed bats, because it affects their primary food supply, which is a lot of our agricultural pests, the corn earworm moth, the cotton bollworm moth, that feeds on a lot of the crops that are south of San Antonio and the crop areas, farm areas. So when we have a really bad drought, there's not enough rainfall to sustain a lot of our crops. So that impacts basically the crop, the corn and cotton and sorghum and stuff that kind of burns up in the field, gets all crispy. This is not very good eating for the moths. So that affects the food supply and that affects the behavior of the bats in the way of they have to spend a lot more time out foraging for food. So when we're in a severe drought, the bats will come out earlier in the evening, say sometime around, usually around 7 o'clock to 7:30 p.m. So they're risking predation from hawks and other raptors to be able to forage for food because they fly at least 60 miles from the cave to forage for food. So they're out longer to get enough to eat. If it's been a really rainy year, and there's plenty of food out there to eat, the bats will they wait till 8:30, closer to dark, before they have to come out.
Hmm. Adrian had a good follow-up question about white nose syndrome. So even if migrating bats aren't being impacted health-wise by PD, are they transferring the PD fungus?
Yes, so that's one of the reasons the fungus has moved around so much from when it was first discovered, 17 years ago in 2007, up in upstate New York. The bats had been moving it. They get the fungal spores on their fur and their bodies, and they move it from roost to roost, from cave to cave. Um, so the Mexican free-tailed bats can move it around from when they migrate as well.
Oh, darn. So Vivian is asking, what do mama bats feed their babies and how often do they feed them?
So bats are mammals, so they're going to nurse their young. The female bats will go out to forage for food and come back in the morning and nurse their baby, and then go out and forage again each night. So they're coming back to the cave and nursing their young.
Got it. And last question from Jilly. What time do the bats come out of the cave to hunt? Can you set your watch to them?
Just about, depending on the time of the year. For example, last night the bats came out at 7:15 p.m. It's this time of the year. It was dark by 7:20, 7:25 because the days are so short. But during the summer months, depending on how much rainfall we've got, the bats typically are coming out around 8 p.m. Doesn't get dark till 9:30 p.m. So we have like an hour and a half to watch the batnado. So they're pretty within a few minutes of each night of what they normally come out because these are nursing female bats. So they've got to get out, eat their body weight, which, for example, with Bracken tonight, they're going to eat over 150 tons of bugs. So they got to go out, eat, get back so they can nurse their young.
Interesting. All right. Well, thank you so much, Fran, for teaching us about everything that creeps, skitters, and slithers at Bracken.
You're welcome.
Yeah, and so to everyone who's watching, to learn more about BCI's work, you can visit our website at batcon.org. And if you haven't already, subscribe to our mailing list and newsletter. That's where you'll hear about future webinars and the different projects that we work on. So any last words for us, Fran?
No, just hopefully we'll see everybody come out and watch the bat flight next summer.
Absolutely. All right, so that's all for now. Thanks for caring about bats, everybody, and we'll see you at the next Bat Chat.